since the beginning of the Third Age. There's a question that we need to answer, and that is, should there be more Lord of the Rings? Hi, I'm Jason Inman.
And I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Yes, and we're here to talk about some nerd questions. We're here to answer some nerd questions. And today we're going to answer a question from our patron Kyle Lamb, who said, should there be more to Lord of the Rings? If you want to be like Kyle Lamb, you want us to answer your question, go over to patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin. Support this free-to-you content, and we can answer your question if you pick the right tier. Kyle Lamb, by the way, he's the Blue Wizard in Middle-earth. Don't know if you knew that. Blue Wizard, Kyle Lamb. Very simple name.
There's a blue and a red wizard.
There is. And we now know his name is Kyle Lamb. Okay.
Isn't it Usador?
No, it's Kyle Lamb. We now this is concrete right now. Ashley, you love Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
You love it a lot, right?
Yes.
How much would you love it? How would you describe it on a planetary scale?
It's my favorite fictional thing.
Okay, so bigger than Jupiter. Okay, got it. Kyle Lamb wants to know, and he has some follow-up questions in here that we can also throw out here. Should there be more Lord of the Rings?
No.
Why?
Because it's perfect. Don't mess with it.
No, you're talking about the books, you're talking about the movies, right?
Both.
Okay.
Both. And I'll tell you why. Because about a decade and a half ago, Christopher Tolkien, who is the heir to the Tolkien estate, decided that he was going to print a bunch of unfinished, half-finished stories, like the Baron and Luthien is probably the most famous one that's been published. It's been about 5 or 7 books now that have come out. They're extended tales from the histories, the prehistories, the Silmarillion era, that kind of stuff. And the stuff that J.R.R. didn't finish, he decided that he, by virtue of blood, was worthy enough to finish them. They're fine. They're fine. They're really interesting if you are into the prehistory. The overall contribution to the mythology is negligible because they're all things that are addressed either by characters, stories, poems, by a better writer in a finished form. And then the reason I don't want any more movies is because the Hobbit movies blow. They just do. They're not good. And they're done by the same creative team with more studio oversight than the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. And for me, the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is so perfect, and it's such lightning in a bottle. I don't think you're going to recapture that no matter how much money you throw at it. I'm waiting for Amazon to surprise me. But generally speaking, in my opinion, when we revisit these things that we love, like Star Wars, you can keep going back to the well and you're gonna get more bad than good. And because for me those original 3 books and the original 3 movies are so perfect, I don't want it sullied by lesser creators, studio oversight, and Hollywood nonsense.
The first thing we should say,
just
though,
to be grumpy about it.
Yeah, the first thing we should say, though, is that just because they make a new Lord of the Rings thing doesn't mean it ruins the older thing.
Absolutely not. And it doesn't take anything away from it.
Same as Star Wars. If you don't like Force Awakens or Last Jedi, who cares?
Then don't watch them.
Empire Strikes Back is still good,
yes,
whether those movies exist or not.
And I will say, too, I would love to work on the Amazon show.
Sure. Put it out there in the universe right now.
That's right. But if you ask me as a fan, I don't want any more because for me it's so perfect, so I will keep it perfect.
Now, excuse me, I will say this. I think your statement of that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is perfect is false. I think it is an.
This is the internet.
I think it is an excellent trilogy. I think those movies are amazing. I love watching them. They're not perfect movies, but neither is the Star Wars trilogy.
I mean, there's no such thing as perfect.
Exactly. So that's my thing. Like there are many scenes in all the Lord of the Rings movies where I'm like, cut that thing.
No.
Get rid of it. You know, and that's my argument. So, but I do agree with you. I do agree with your statement that I don't know where you go with that. I don't know where you go with that world because, as you said, and as we know, there aren't any more books to come up with. If we're making new Lord of the Rings things, it's going to be brand new things, and I worry that any creator, even I want to say David Milch, who created Deadwood, as good of a writer as he is, even he, I don't think, could match J.R.R. Tolkien or his ideas. There's a certain thing for me, it's like the only Star Wars movies I feel like I ever want to see are the ones made by George Lucas that was alive in the 70s or 80s. I don't want late 90s George Lucas to make Star Wars movies. I want 70s and 80s George Lucas to make Star Wars movies. There's something that he was onto. There's some fire in his gut that he had. And I think Lord of the Rings is the same thing. And Peter Jackson proved it with The Hobbit.
Well, and
like, he couldn't pull it off.
The difficult thing is we've already seen the events of The Lord of the Rings, which is the end of the world.
Yeah.
So if we go before then, like, nothing is going to matter as much like The Hobbit, because it's not the Ring of... Like, we know Frodo is coming... And anything that happens after that, which, by the way, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about extensively, we know a lot of what happens after Lord of the Rings. That's... The Fourth Age is, like, very peaceful. It's this time of prosperity. It's difficult to drum up the type of drama that you're going to want to be looking for to sustain a film or a television franchise.
Now, Ashley, because I want to hear your answer to this question, and Kyle Lamb gave us a little follow-up question here. There is going to be a Lord of the Rings television show. We know Amazon's going to do it. What direction? What would you like it to see? Now, you and I have had this conversation. We've had this conversation off air, and I'm going to throw out some of these ideas that I gave to you that I think would make interesting Lord of the Rings television shows. You could do every generation of Isildur's family until...
Of the Númenóreans.
Of the Númenóreans.
From their founding to Aragorn.
From their founding to Aragorn, or from their founding to Isildur. So you see that battle that you see in the opening of Lord of the Rings. That's the last season. You could see the evolution of Sauron, to where, like, we see Sauron start off as a normal dude, and by season 5, he's the badass Sauron who nobody can stop. There's a bunch of... You could make the show about the founding of Minas Tirith, like the building of the city, some stuff like that. But you know Lord of the Rings better than I do. You get your druthers. Yeah. This show is happening. You cannot change that.
Yeah.
This show is happening. Let's say it's a 5-season show. What do you want it to be about? Do you want it to be an anthology series? Do you want it to be... What do you want to see for 5 seasons?
Not the Second Age, which is what we're getting. To me, in my opinion, the most interesting stuff that we haven't already mined is the First Age stuff. I love the Battle of Gondolin, which is like the fall of this huge elvish city. You could do that for like an entire season. I would want an anthology show set in the prehistory and the founding of Middle-earth. So Middle-earth is like a vaguely Middle Ages sort of European thing. I would want to go like back and tell their King Arthur stories. So season 1, like I would bring the Valinor over, who are like the angel and god figures to, like, I would show you the founding of Middle-earth. I would show you the birth of the wizards and why we had wizards. And then I would go through and I would do, because all of the historical things that characters reference in Lord of the Rings are referenced because they're important. The Battle of Gondolin is referenced. The Beren and Luthien is referenced. Beren and Luthien were the first human and elf to ever fall in love. They fell in love in the First Age of Middle-earth. They're ancestors of both Arwen and Aragorn. They're so important. Aragorn sings their song, and it's in the extended movies. He sings the Lay of Beren and Luthien, and they're so important that J.R.R. Tolkien and his wife, their headstones say Beren and Luthien. So to me, like, if there's anywhere you start...
the show should be about Beren and Luthien?
I think at least one season should deal with Beren and Luthien because they meant so much to him. I think there's more to mine the further away from Lord of the Rings you go.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're going to the Second Age, but the Second Age is also when elves start to decide they're gonna leave and humans start to take over more. And I know that we've picked a human settlement with the Númenóreans because it's cheap. We don't have to put no one in makeup or as much makeup and things like that. They don't have to be as tall. But, like, I want elves and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want humans. I live with humans.
Well, they could do... Elves would be on the cheap side because all you're doing is Spock ears.
Right, elves will be around, but if you're specifically dealing with the Númenóreans, that's the first major race of men, so you're dealing with their founding and they're finding their place. In the Second Age is when they become the big... You know, it's kind of like England or America. They become the main power and the most powerful society.
The other interesting thing that's about this Lord of the Rings series is that just because there's no way that you can do a modern fantasy series without being heavily inspired by Game of Thrones.
I don't want
and
Lord of the Rings through the lens of Game of Thrones. I don't.
But the sad thing is I think that's exactly what Amazon's going to give us.
I know, and that makes me sad, and I'll tell you why that makes me sad, because I like Game of Thrones a lot.
I do too. I like both of them.
So do I. But Lord of the Rings, because of when it was created, and because it's not an allegory, but you can definitely see, again, the Arthurian, the Christian overtones that made this story what it is. It is very pure in its representation of good and evil and black and white.
Yeah.
And it's a little, by modern standards, sugar-coated in that way. And I don't want to see a Middle-earth where people are getting raped.
Yeah.
Which is like bread and butter for Game of Thrones. And Westeros is a show and a world that deals in moral gray areas because it's more contemporary.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't want that for Lord of the Rings.
I don't want that either. But again, it's the same thing like when Discovery was going to happen.
There's no way you can't do it without Battlestar.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's because Battlestar is in Game of Thrones the same way. Like what Battlestar was to sci-fi, Game of Thrones is to fantasy. Yeah. So like everything post that show is gonna have a tinge of it now. Is gonna have, because it was so huge. So that's gonna be interesting to see. Like, I hope that the Game of Thrones allusions are more visual.
I would be fine with that, more stylistic.
Yeah.
I don't care if half of the cast comes over.
Yeah.
Great. Make Sansa an elf.
Yeah. Who would you cast Sean Bean as? In Lord of the Rings, even though he's already been Lord of the Rings. Who can he be again?
It would be really hard not to cast him as like one of the heroes of Numenor or something like that.
He's like, one day I would like to name my son Boromir.
Yeah, I don't know. It would
someone in my family line should name Boromir.
If he's a Numenorean hero, he would be Aragorn's ancestor.
Oh.
Not Boromir.
Someone in my family line should be named Aragorn.
That would be really funny.
And then they should nickname him Strider. Nope, I'm dead again. Yep.
Yeah, someone who died immediately. Though Richard Madden, young Aragorn.
Ooh.
Don't do young Aragorn. I don't want it.
Well, you just cast him.
You
can't take it away from me.
Richard Madden as Baron. I don't want to see young Aragorn.
Okay. I know that's something that Kyle Lamb wants to see. So Kyle Lamb, thank you so much for asking that question, and thank you so much for being the blue wizard and making sure that our flowers bloom, because he does that. I don't know if you know that. Kyle, that's all him. It's Kyle.
Thank you.
Kyle does that. He also
loud.
Yes. Well, I have to praise him because he keeps our flowers in bloom, and he also supports our Patreon. You can do that too, patreon.com/Jawiin. Go to the My University tier, ask the question, support this free to you content, and you get your question answered online just the same. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe beneath this video. I'm Jason Inman.
I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Thanks so much, you blue wizards.